Hi there, BJ.
Good morning.
I'm going to rely on you to take us for a little bit here because I'm going to try to get our feed up in the background just to make sure we're live. But I think
Yeah,
we
can
are.
do.
And if you're watching us, go ahead and let me know we're live. That would also be a help.
Yeah, lacking a guest this week. We had an idea to discuss some of the topics, the hot topics in volleyball coaches and trainers, which is the Facebook group that most of our guests and probably listeners come from. Um, and just bring up some of the things that are on coaches' minds. Um, from this past week and discuss them. Probably give a couple of our own opinions on them, and just kind of hit the hot topics. And what was interesting to me, I think the overall theme was I picked out 4, 5, 6 things that had multiple posts about the topic, and almost well, not almost none of these 5 or 6 topics are about X's and O's, which you
Yeah,
might
yeah.
expect the real, the real volleyball geeks would be talking about how to run this play or how to get this to happen correctly. Most of the things um, are things that happen outside of the court, off the court, and I think the general idea of that is we're coaching people. We're not just making
Yeah.
volleyball players. So it was that was an interesting aspect to me anyway, as I was picking out this group of topics. But
Yeah,
um,
and it's we had a long talk about the idea and also about covering the topics while which kind of come up on a regular basis, but have come up this week on VCT without covering VCT because it's a private group, and we're happy that that the topics come up. It's a great discussion, but more importantly, it's stuff that we all encounter as coaches. I probably encountered almost all of the things that we're going to talk about today in the last week, even. But I have some old time stories too, because some folks. It's funny. There was the one post where someone said, I got. I can just see it happening. You get that lovely Apple if you're an Apple person, and you get the notification of a memory in your photos, and it pops up, and it's that team with the parent that was just awful, and then all of a sudden PTSD strikes you again because you've been through that. But we'll
right,
get to that later.
yeah,
So, you know, um, let's get started.
yeah,
What's the
I think
first topic you
probably
want to cover?
yeah. I think the biggest thing, and certainly the most important reminder that we had this year was the earthquake that occurred in Turkey and Syria along that border. Um, it's not something that we hear about an awful lot in the United States, but it is a, a very active earthquake area, and this particular earthquake was pretty devastating on both the Richter scale and Mercalli scale, which are the two. I'm sorry, I'm a geologist, so I got to talk about that kind of stuff. Um, they're both very significant um, uh, events that occurred. The death toll is approaching 30,000 people, which is an incredible loss. And I think, right, maybe for the greater group, we all travel. You know, everybody that's in volleyball gets on a bus and travels around. Some people fly across the country, and there are those few people that get to travel around the world. Um, it's when you traveling can be a little bit dangerous. In this case, the case that was brought into VCT was a couple of volleyball teams, a young men's team and a girls team were traveling. Ended up staying in a hotel very near the epicenter of a major earthquake, and there were a lot of people hurt or killed from these teams just due to the travel. And well, that's not meant to scare anyone. It just it certainly travel is a risk, and it's a risk we all accept as coaches.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
reminder of this is a human game, and that'll be a common theme through all of this. It's definitely a human game, and tragedy strikes in weird ways. We I had a player pass away on the court in practice one night. You know,
you know,
15-year-old kid. Um, and it was, we had everything we could throw at it. We had all the equipment. We had the fast response by EMT, all of that. Um, and it's a big human thing. And you know, it's helpful I find as a coach, I allow myself to get annoyed or all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, I go back and remind, I'm looking at my team this year. My JV team's a lot of really very, very green players. I didn't get the players from multi sports that I was hoping for, and I just kind of came back and said, you know what, quit banging your head against the wall, make this great for the kids who are in it, because they're in it, and help them get as good as they can and enjoy the sport as much as they can and enjoy being part of a team, because that's we don't all get to do that.
sure,
And
yeah, I
knock
agree.
off the wanting to uh, show show that you're a great coach, show that your team is a great team, and get out of their way. Help them do that.
Right. Yeah, and I made this remark to a smaller group of people this week, on Audible. If you have an Audible account, Viktor Frankl's "Man's Search for Meaning" is free. So I've been listening to that as I walk the dog or do other things, and I just made the remark that listening to Frankl talk about his experience in Nazi concentration camps made it a lot easier for me to shovel the 6 inches of slush out of my driveway. I had a lot
Yeah.
less to complain about. So
Yeah,
we're
my wife doesn't miss that part, although
yeah.
I'm the one who wound up doing that most of the time, unless I was out of town. But yeah,
So we're thinking about the
definitely.
people in Syria and Turkey, particularly the volleyball people, and hoping that they can make a as good a recovery as possible, and hopefully I know that they've made some upgrades in building codes in that area over the last uh, couple of decades, but obviously they're not there yet. So they're still working on that, and
Yeah.
hopefully that's the good that comes out of this. I guess let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both both Pat Medea and Pete Wong reminded us that the birthday of volleyball occurred during the week. Back in 1895, William G. Morgan had this great idea about a game just a little bit less stressful than his friend James Naismith had designed. Um, and came up with the idea of mint net, which eventually, I think it was a year later, they decided to go with volleyball as the name. And I thought this is a great place to just bring up. We go through these occasional, I shouldn't even say occasional, it's kind of regular rule changes in volleyball. Sometimes they're major changes. Certainly every year there are rule changes, or every time the rule book is rewritten, which I I think USA Volleyball does every couple of years. I know NFHS has new rules every year, mostly off court things that change. But you get people that are resistant to the rule changes, and they want to go back to so-called old school rules. And whenever it comes up, I want to say, well, how old school are you talking? You
Right.
know, because all of us played at a time and probably liked the rules that we played with, and sometimes those rules change. I mean, at the beginning of the game, the net was 6'6". There were no antennas. You could hit the ball as many times as you wanted. You could uh, air dribble, as they called it, where you set yourself over and over and over again. There was no limit to the number of players on the court, no limit to the substitutions. They played by innings. I mean, I wonder, and we'll never know the answer to this, but I wonder if Morgan would even recognize the game other than that there's a net and a
Mm-hmm.
ball. It's certainly not in the spirit of what he was looking to design. He wanted a game that was less stressful than basketball. And I think what volleyball has become, as well, the stresses are different. It easily could be as stressful, if not more stressful in some ways. So it was a great reminder by Pete and Pat. It's neat to know some of the history of the game, um, and it's a cool topic whenever it comes up to rule changes. Just something to
Yeah, and
point
I,
out.
I think I think it's kind of fun to go back. I mean, in my volleyball lifetime, there been a lot of changes, and it's kind of interesting to look back on. I remember my son was of the age that he got started fairly young, just because I was in the gym, and he had just become proficient at serve receive underhand when
Mm,
overhand wasn't allowed. An immediate
yeah.
call, right? So then they changed the rule, and he wasn't very good at overhand. And he's like, "Dad, I just figured this out, and now I got to learn a whole new thing." I'm like, "Well, great, yeah, you do, And sorry, he said, "So I don't get rewarded for all. I don't have an advantage over these other clowns who just grab it with their hands and throw it. My." And I said, "Well, first of all, the skills will carry over." But and he was it was a little tongue in cheek, but it was kind of funny.
What
I
do you think
think
the
back,
biggest change was during your volleyball career? What was the
well,
largest change that you went through?
well, that was one. Um, I mean, when I started, the block was a touch.
Yeah.
You couldn't hit the net with a serve, and but probably the biggest change was the move from side out scoring to rally scoring. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and the days of the Japanese team playing hours and hours and hours because their defense was so good, and you couldn't get the ball to score, and those kinds of things. Um, Other
Yeah.
changes,
I
you
think that was the
know.
biggest one too. Uh,
Changes in equipment. The ball, I will not name the vendor, but the ball that everybody wanted, and I had to scour the New York metro area to find one. Back then, today is a third tier ball,
right.
in most places.
Right.
Even I'll tip my hat to Wilson, because I never really thought of Wilson as a decent volleyball, but their golds aren't bad, and you couldn't get them in the last year or so. It's
Yep.
not, the change of uh, the change of ball, not geometry, but just the way they're built, and
Sure.
those kinds of things. What else?
Right.
Um, Lately, it's the throw down the line. Although that's probably going to change a little bit. I think people are going to get a little tighter on that. But the thrown ball, that but I was telling my kids the other day. I'll leave it at this. I was telling the kids the other day, hey, by the way, you adapt to what's allowed. I said, frankly, when guys like me played, when we reached out with I can't really do this on screen, but when we reached out with our hands, we used the back of our hand. If our arm went out, we had to throw our arm out and throw the back of our hand at the ball, because anytime you had an open palm, you were going to get called for a
Yeah.
lift.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Flipper. You
happen.
got to use the flipper.
Yeah, you gotta. It's your only choice. If you go the other way, you're going to get called. And if you take a ball with two hands overhand, you're going to get called. So those were immediate things. Those were like black and white things.
Right.
So um,
I think on the men's
and
side, they call it a scoop. That's what I've
mhm,
heard the men's coaches use, and at least the men's coaches that I've talked to, where
yeah,
they make their defensive width as wide as they can. Their hands are big and down, and you just, because the ball's moving so fast, you're just doing everything you can to scoop the ball back up into the air, and that open palm is not getting called. Not in men's volleyball for sure.
yeah. And I think the last thing that we talk about here a fair amount is, and this is more recent and it's more coaching, is the move away from um, strict drill-based technique and the teaching, allowing players to learn technique as opposed to be dictated technique.
Yeah,
And I think back in our podcasts and our live streams, the discussion with Lauren Anderson about visiting the Paralympic program. And you sit there and you got to have your hand like this, and you got to have your wrist turned down. You got to have exactly this, and you got to make this move and this footwork. And he's like, some of them don't have feet. I mean, come on, I can't tell them about
right.
footwork. I can't tell them about arm placement because they've got 1.5 arms. So and they play a great level of ball. So it's figure it out for yourself and make it work for yourself, which is a major shift.
Yeah, that was one of the great. That was one of the great experiences that I had as a coach, and I think it was in, I say it was '99 or 2000. Uh, I played sitting for the first time with some of our national team players, and it was apparent immediately that a lot of the stuff that I had been teaching was a waste of time. That people are going to figure out with their own tools how to make the ball go to places. We want the ball to go here. You figure out a way, and I can give you some pointers. But boy, if you sit with our para athletes, you learn quickly that you are learning more from them than they're learning from you. You're largely in charge of tactics and not so much in charge of skill or technique, because they know their bodies, they know what they can do. And
Yeah.
it's been an incredible uh, learning ground for me, and I think for a lot of coaches. And it's funny how resistant a large portion of our coaching community is to that idea,
You
even
know, it's
though
I kind of I'm starting to not look at it as resistant as much as it's hard. I go out there, and if you came to one of my practices, you would see probably half drill based kind of cueing that's carryover. And so I keep reminding myself of, okay, what if I let them play and I decide to stop play? I need to be able to suggest something that they can try to discover new things as
yeah,
opposed to telling them what to do. And
yeah,
that's not always easy. You start with somebody and you're teaching them to underhand pass. There's some basics. And so, I stopped yesterday because I have some very new players. And then there was a couple actually, that were bending their arms. And, you know, so we had experienced and inexperienced players. And they said, listen, just want to suggest one thing to you. Understand that if you bend your arms, you may want to do that in certain circumstances, but there are some consequences to that in terms of control of the ball. And I said, and one of the boys said, yes, you hit yourself in the face. and and it's like, okay, yes, that is one thing that can happen when you bend your arms. So understand that. So you might play with that a little bit. See if straightening your arm gives you more control. That's different than you got to keep your arms straight. You got to keep your wrists turned down. You got to keep your hands have to be this way. So
yeah.
it's been a change for me, and some coaches like it, and some don't like it at all.
Well, Tillet with France won a gold medal by coaching them to bend their arms.
Mm-hmm.
Dig, use your
Yeah,
arms, move them to, to get the ball to where you want to go. It's an interesting thing to talk about for sure.
absolutely.
Um, Probably the biggest topic of the week, and this is from multiple posts. I think there were at least four different posts about players' emotions, and I just at the outset, I'd like to say we talk about the game being uh, mental. It's a mental game. Yet we spend very little time training the mental side of the game. And I guess in a sense, you're always training the mental side. Even if you're playing, you're learning some things, but not specifically tailored to it.
Yeah,
And even just saying the mental side is not it's not detailed enough. There's your emotional intelligence, and I think that's what people were getting at with these couple of posts. And I'll give you a couple of examples of things. We had we had one coach talking about players that were as soon as they feel a little bit under pressure, there might be one or two or a bunch of them crying, even during a match, because they just couldn't handle it. Or a young player, and this one I've seen up close and personal. A sixth grader coming out and playing for the first time. She walks into a gym and just sitting in the stands and just being overcome with emotion because it's all brand new and it's loud, and all of a sudden people are watching their expectations, and then there's the emotional side of what your teammates will say to you. There's a lot of work that goes into that emotional intelligence, and I think there were some great comments from people um, that were coming in and saying, yeah, here's how we dealt with it, here's how you deal with it, and it this will come up again, but there's kind
yeah,
of two ways. One is there's sort of the brute force method. um, Yank them, sit them down, kick them out of the gym until they're calm. And certainly I've done that in the past,
mm-hmm.
and maybe from time to time that's an all right topic or a
Yeah,
tactic. I mean, if somebody just can't get control of themselves, and if you know the player well enough, maybe they just need a break. But I think the comments that I tend to gravitate toward, and again, like you were saying, this is hard, is it takes everyday attention to work on pressure situations and how to deal with pressure and how to get away from pressure and how to realize, this is it's a game. We're not, you know, nobody's this isn't, we're not putting our lives on the line here. We're
yeah,
playing a game, competing, so that part of it, just that everyday consistency of working on emotional intelligence and not waiting till the end. You can't wait till the situation. You got to work on it from, uh, I don't know, probably from the first time you meet the players.
Well, the other thing I found, and there's probably ways to accelerate this, and I bet if Dan was with us, he could give us a few ideas on that topic. But I've had players who they're just as a coach, I can think of one really excellent player I had who was so hard on herself. She would work herself up into if she had a couple of errors in a row, she was a basket case. And you know what happens? If you encourage them and you tell them it's okay and you let them go, they grow up. And like 2 years later, she'd gone off to play for another club, and her dad came up to me and said, "Thank you for what you did for her." And which was out of the blue. I just ran into him at a tournament, and I'm like, I just tried to tell her it was okay. And there's a lot of different little tricks you can use, not tricks, but I had I had this very serious. We were running a 6-2. I had this very serious setter. She rotated out because we were bringing in a bigger player in the front row, and she was really upset with herself, and you could just tell she was holding it in. And I just looked at her. I said, "Do you need to cry right now?" And she just went, "Yes." And I said, "Go ahead, cry, get it out. You got 3 rotations, and then you got to go back in and play again." And and I've had that happen 2 or 3 times at least. And sometimes you just need it, and it's okay. And she felt better, and her teammates got a kick out of the whole thing. But I mean, it's one of those things where we are emotional, and that's not the cognitive side. It's not the prefrontal frontal cortex part of your brain, man. You're and so you need to kind of, as you say, and have some emotional intelligence, but recognize that maybe you've got a player who's just not ready for it or not comfortable with it. I had a player last year who was going through some difficult times, and it was. I tried to make our program a place for him to come if he wanted to, and he's not in the program anymore. He's doing much better, and he's happy and not and that's a good thing. I had a player that just this year who was struggling a little bit with weight, and not on the heavy side. He was, and he's doing better. So as coaches, we need to go even beyond the emotional and look at, hey, these kids may have some challenges that they could use some professional help on that we don't, we're not able to do, or we shouldn't do because we don't know how to do it as professionals, and know when to get help. The way I got help is I talked to one of his teachers, and she said, "Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing." I said, "Well, okay, what do we do?" He said, "Here's what we do," and got him help, and he's a happier, better off player. So you're going to see emotion, and I think the one that of these three that I don't have an answer for, and if any of our listeners have an answer, maybe chime in sometime in the comments. Is the comments that you hear from other players that coaches just don't hear or don't see or don't observe.
Yeah.
And that's tough because, and I've encountered it. So when I saw that note, I'm like, yeah, I don't have an answer for that one. It's a challenge.
Yeah, if anybody's from VCT is listening, I think the best answer really came from Emily Swanson. I don't think she will mind me saying. I know we're not listing people's names as we didn't get their
Yep.
permissions, but Emily wouldn't mind at all. She mentioned, if you hear about that sort of thing, you need to react to it, and maybe you can address the team to some
Yeah.
degree. I think, and I think Emily's point is excellent. And the only thing I would add to that is if we could address them before the issues occur.
Mm.
You know, it's day one before anybody laces up their shoes. What are some of the expectations that we have amongst ourselves, amongst our teammates? And I heard some great stuff. I recently listened to "If Gold Is Our Destiny," the great recent book about our 1984 men's team and some of the things that they went through. And they had a great exercise in there where the couple of psychologists had everyone on the team write uh, things that help the team, things that don't help the team, and or things that hurt the team. You got a 3x5 card. You had to write it on the card, and they got to pin them up on the wall. You know, things that help over on this side, things that hurt over on the other side, and it took. If you can imagine in 1984, it's a long
Mm-hmm.
time ago, and a bunch of strong-willed men. It's going to take somebody pretty brave to go and pin their ideas up on the wall the first time. But as soon as somebody did that, everybody did it, and then from that they formed. Here's what we can do. Here are the things that we need to do. Here are the things that we need to stop doing. and most of them were really simple. Um, you know, there were a lot of things like pat a teammate on the back, stop gossiping about them, or quit yelling or screaming at them. Give them some help instead of, you know, instead of the other. I mean, it's such a simple seeming exercise, but it's hard to jump over that barrier. So number one, I recommend the book. It was a fascinating read, and
Yeah.
especially if you like volleyball, it's finally a good volleyball book. I listened to it. It was pretty well narrated, I would say, and it was narrated by the son of one of the team psychologists.
Yeah.
Ton of great stories. So I would highly recommend it for anybody that's dealing with these types of issues. But I think the biggest thing is it takes work. It takes everyday work and a lot of consistency.
Yeah, and maybe listening a little more. I find with all those kinds of situations, also trying to get all sides of the story. Or my wife and I used to call it gathering facts before you go and make a decision, before you go, discipline somebody or have a tough conversation. Try to get as much of the background as you can, because you never know when you'll have a situation where, it's a he said, she said kind of difficult situation where you really want to try and make you want to try to get past that. You want to try to get to being a good teammate. And I was talking to a football coach a week or so ago, and he had taken over our program, and they've done quite well, and he's a solid coach. And he said, last year he cut four starters, and he just said, mid-season they were, not behaving right, doing all kinds of things that you don't want your athletes to do. And he said in the past they might have gotten away with it, but that's not how we run our program. We'll do without them. So we cut them loose. Well, his comment was that made a change in how people, how the seriousness of his athletes about understanding that, this was for real, and this was, the kind of, we're not going to tolerate that as a program. I've been gradually moving. This year, I've really pushed the grades. It's like, guys, you have a grade problem, you're not in practice. I used to let them practice a bit, but it's like, nope, if you've got time, you go to homework club that they have every day. You go and see your teachers. Use the time to your advantage. But we're not going to have academic problems persist. So, everybody's different. I came from a world where, I've never had a kid academically unavailable in any program I had been in, to a more challenging academic environment. And, it's been a good education for me.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's just I think we've talked so much about the mental side, and I think it's just been the last few years that we finally have kind of carved out this third area, which is the emotional side, and it's going to take some work,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
understand it. I mean, I think some of Mickle's top uh, thoughts, and he can comment or or correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, he believes very strongly in journaling, just so you can go back and remember what you were thinking, feeling, doing at times, and how you may or may not have dealt with things well. And then another one of his big things is just doing breathing relaxation exercise, um, just to be able to get back to something that's, it gets you back to, I don't know if normal is the right way, but back to something that's calmer, so that you can be more reasonable and think through a problem that you might be having.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's a tricky area. I mean, it's something I don't know a ton about. I'm learning about it as much as I possibly can, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think the
yeah,
the main thing there is just to learn and also to know what your limitations are so that you can get help if you need it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I would agree. And I think somewhat piggybacking on that, Heidi Anderson had a great post this week, another one of our admins, and I'm sure she won't mind us bringing her up. Um, I I don't know if it was 100% based on these emotion posts that have been coming up, but she asked a question which I thought was great. What do coaches do that make you nervous? Like what do coaches do that make players nervous? And it reminded me almost immediately of these lists that George Carlin used to make. And if nobody knows George Carlin, or if you're too young to know Carlin or never studied his work, um, he would he would do these really long lists of kind of crazy stuff. And the one that it immediately reminded me of was I think you can Google things to look out for, things to watch out for. I can't start it the way he did because it's a little graphic, but it was, the second through fourth or fifth things is quicksand, body lice, evil spirits, gridlock, acid rain. You know, he's just making this long list, and I started making one of those of what coaches do, and it just it's amazing the things that we do as coaches that unhinge kids, or even not just kids but our players. Um, we at times we do things that hurt them more than it helps, for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, it's catching yourself doing that. It's like, oh, yeah, because you're not, most of the time, it's not intended. And it's also, what does that kid need? And one of the best lessons I got out of in coaching was I had a one first year player, nice kid, was a senior playing volleyball for the first time, but he was athletic and was a good part of our team. And at one point, he just said, "Coach, I don't need you to tell me every time I, make an error what I should have done." And I'm like, "Well, I don't do that every." I said, and I'm thinking I got defensive, like you're kind of, you tend to do. And then I just said, "Okay, here's the deal. I'm not quoting the president. Um, so just tell me if you want feedback. Let me know. If not, I'm just going to let you work on it and you know do what you
Yeah,
need to do." Um,
Keegan Cook blew
so
us away. We
yeah,
we were at High Performance, and Keegan Cook now taking over for Hugh at Minnesota. What a what a situation to work under. You got one of the greatest volleyball coaches of all time is down the hallway, not coaching volleyball, and now Keegan's got to take that thing over. I mean, it could be awesome or it could be terrible. I hope it works out. Well, I hope it works out for them personally because I like them both, but I hope there's enough conflict that Wisconsin can beat them.
well, one of the better stories about that kind of thing was when Steve Jobs turned to Tim Cook and said, "Tim,
Yeah,
I don't want you to be me. You do you. I have confidence you'll take the company in a good direction, but
yeah.
do it your way."
Yeah, and I think Hugh's going to be great at that. There's no doubt. His book is recently out, and I just listened to the Coach Your Brains Out podcast about it. Sounds excellent. It's on my order list. But just getting back to Keegan and what you were talking about, we were sitting with, I don't know, five or six of the kind of the volleyball geeks were sitting around at High Performance a few years ago when they still had it, and Keegan was mic'd up and walked up to a 14-year-old kid and said, "Do you mind if I coach you right now?" And just immediately, everybody in our little working group, we're all like reaching out, grab somebody's arm, get their attention. Like, did you hear what he just said?
Yeah.
It was like the first time that any of us had ever heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
We were just all more used to the brute force method of coaching. And I can't say I'm good at that yet. I tend to I still tend to, I'm a lot more one on one, but I still tend to go to a player with something. I think what we're going to do, what I'm going to ask my coaching staff to do, and I don't know if this will work or not, but on our whiteboard, which is yet to be purchased, have every player's name and just have a red, white, or a stoplight essentially, and so a red, orange, or red, yellow, green. Wow, can't spit that out. Um, when they come into practice, the first thing they do is go over to the whiteboard and mark which column they're in for the day. If you're green, that means coach me up. If you're yellow, it means ask me first. And if it's red, don't talk to me today.
Leave me alone. Yeah.
And I think that would, going back to these last two topics, I think that would help both the coaches and the players, one, get along better, and then two, um, do a little bit more individual coaching. And that
Hmm.
all kind of stems from Keegan's idea. I don't think that that's an original idea of mine. I think there are a lot of people that have done that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I hope we can implement that in our gym, and a year from now, I guess we can talk about it and see if it was any good.
Yeah, I've done it more informally, but I let the guys know, and it's actually you feel good about it when a player comes up and you say, "Coach, I've been having a really rough day today. I'm not sure I'm all there." I'm like, "Okay, well, do what you can, and if I can help, let me know what I can do, and hopefully this will be a good part of your day." I've got a couple kids. I got one in particular who's real apologetic because he hasn't been able to make all the practices, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it can be a challenge for them, and you're a small part of their life. But I go by the mantra. It's probably Kessel. I don't know who said it first or who connected with me with it first, but we have the opportunity to make the time in the gym with us the best part of their day. And if we
Yeah,
can do that, and in my case, there's a lot of students who are under a lot of pressure on a lot of levels. It's not just academics; it's academics, and it's social, and it's at home, and it's all kinds of stuff. And if we can just make the gym a little better place for them, that where they can have some fun and they can learn, great. Am I successful at doing that? I don't know, but I try.
that's how I feel.
Yeah, it's like all
I
right.
feel this. Yeah, I think it's an awareness on coach's part. We don't spend enough time on it. It's just, what can we do to make things easier for them to learn? And
Yeah,
maybe, 70% uh, today they have, or maybe they only have 25% of their normal to give. Well, and give me 100% of the 25.
yeah.
We'll
Right,
take
right.
25% from you today.
And I think the last thing for me is I've been really trying hard and getting better at it. Is to let my ego just put it off to the side. It's like what if I catch myself? I really want to do this. I really want to win this match. If I ever feel like that, I have to remind myself that's a really selfish thing because that's not what I should be there for.
Yeah,
And again, I don't mean to be critical of any other coaches because some coaches, that's their livelihood. It's just win, baby. In
sure.
my world, that's not the case, and it shouldn't be the case in my world. Should I try to get the best out of them? Absolutely, that's more of the goal. It's to teach them the game, to get them to get them to be lifelong volleyball players, and enjoy the game enough to use it after they. I mean, I really didn't. I just was telling somebody the other day, the boys like, when did you play? I said I started playing in gym class as a senior in college,
Yeah.
and then played in grad school every day because that was my outlet and became a gym rat that way. Um, everybody gets everybody's path is different. But if you love the game, every now my 4'11" setter, kind of came to me and said, "Hey, you ought to coach." 23 years ago,
Yeah.
so thanks for the suggestion because it's been fun, and I think I've grown a little bit anyway. Well, how about we move on to the next topic, which was just a totally, well, Related, but not.
Yeah, yeah, it's related. We had somebody come up with the idea that they had a parent that was giving them trouble. And before we get too far into the parenting issue, now it, we tend to compound the parent stories,
Yeah.
and then everybody is, oh, parents are just terrible. Well, I don't know. It was a
No.
couple years ago. We took a poll inside of the group, and most of the people, I think it was about 1% of the people, said that they had continual parent problems. The overwhelming majority of people said that maybe 1% of the parents were really a problem. Most of the parents were great. It's just one, when you get one, they become the vocal minority and they can start steering things. So I think that was the case for this person. They had a parent that was wanting to meet twice a week, and getting a lot of comments from them after the game or before the game, and telling this coach what to do. And there, it again, it sort of boiled down to two different styles, or two different tactics. One was the brute force method. Hey, you can't talk to me. You have to wait 24 hours, or this is just not something we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And then there was the other side of it. Get to know the parents a little bit. Spend some time with them between matches, after um, after or before matches, outside the gym. Get to know them some, and show them that you really are there for their kids. And I
Yeah.
think that sort of thing probably makes a lot of the parent issues go away. There are certainly some things that parents do. There are also some things that coaches do that get them in trouble with the parents. One of them, I think that's just crazy, is when we take their cell phones away. Um, Most parents probably give their kids a cell phone so that they can communicate with each other, especially when they're traveling. I just heard about a situation today where the coach doesn't allow kids to use cell phones on the bus. So when the bus gets home, when the bus is traveling home, the coach sends a note to all the parents saying, "Hey, we're 10 minutes away from the school. Come and get your kid."
Yeah.
Well, some of the parents are 30 minutes away from school.
Right.
So then the coach gets there, and the coach is mad because the parents aren't there.
Yeah.
The math doesn't work out there. So I think we do some things as coaches, and I think putting the walls up. This is just my opinion now. I think putting the walls up to parents is probably what hurts us. Um,
Yeah. I guess I'm in the you do you kind of camp. So because everybody's a little different. I remember when I coached, my first club director was constantly telling me you talk to the parents too much. You set yourself up when you do that, and I understood where he was coming from. I think it's helpful early on to set expectations as clear as you can. And then it's kind of up to you. I was one when I would be at a tournament, I would talk to parents, and have a discussion. If it got into actually rarely got into tactical things, but if it got into tactical things, it said, look, that's not an area I'm going to talk to you about. If they ask about, well, I had one parent. Yeah, this is classic, right? We all say 24-hour rule, and generally speaking, that's a good rule
well, not
because things
all.
are, yeah. Well, fair enough, but a lot of coach, a lot of club directors, a lot of coaches, say 24 hours afterwards we can have a discussion, and I have some recommendations on that, but I had a parent. I was at a Saturday tournament. The dad was, I got even the other parents were like, he's really upset with you. Like, okay. And I thought about it for a minute. I said, I think we can have a conversation. Plus, he's going to stew on it all weekend. It's going to ruin his weekend.
Yeah.
Let me take, and so I sat him down, and it was, why is my daughter not serving? Because she has a good serve, blah blah. Well, she was a left-hander, and she was playing right side, and we were running a 6-2. So, but as a parent, you don't know what I'm doing, So I said, well, here's how it works. Here's what we're doing. It's not that I don't like your daughter's serve. I wasn't super, because it was a great serve when it was in, but it was out a lot. So, okay, but still, and she was left-handed, so she was ideal for a right side. And she was a big kid, so you got a blocking left-hander. I mean, you gotta love it. So I explained to him all of that. Took some time, and by the time we were done, he was calmed down and okay, and he could enjoy the rest of his weekend. And that, and some of the parents were like, "Wow, you managed that well. I wouldn't have done that." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's situational. I wouldn't always do that." Quick story. So I'm a first year coach. I'm new to this club. I'm learning. It turned out I had the parent from hell, but I didn't know that to start with, and I mishandled it. I at one point in time had a 2.5 hour lunch discussion with this guy at a restaurant about his daughter and all this stuff. And I was ready. I really had super self doubt about whether I should be a coach or not. And I was at a tournament, and I cannot remember John's last name, but John was coaching College of DuPage, and we had it was a club, it's club coach, so I'm doing 15 club, and I'm there, and it just happened to strike up a conversation with John, and I was like, John, I don't know, I don't know that this is for me. I gotta, and John said, look, you're a good coach. We need coaches. Don't quit. Stay with it. You'll be all right. It's just you got this one situation. And after the fact, because what would happen at matches later in the season was he would sit there with one other dad, and the two of them would grouse the whole time, and support each other. And the other
Hmm.
parents took to calling them Statler and Waldorf, for you
Yeah.
Muppet fans. But two things happened. One is I learned how I handle folks. I'm like, look, I'm happy to meet to talk to you, or talk to you on the phone, or however you want to connect, about your daughter or son and what their situation is. We'll have a 15-minute conversation. That's it, and I'm happy to do it. And if it's if it's significant, now that I'm in the high school realm, I'll say, by the way, it'll be you and your son or daughter and me and the athletic director, and we'll have a conversation. And because you got to protect yourself. I'm we're both off campus. I have a new coach. I'm hoping will get approved shortly. But we don't have if I could get a teacher or another administrator, great. But it's got to be somebody with some can vouch for what the conversation was. And that never happens. I mean, we never get to that point. The minute you tell them that you and the athletic director and your son or daughter are going to meet with us, they back off pretty quickly, unless it's really something serious. And if it's something serious, we have to have that conversation, and it
Right.
can be. But I learned from that experience, and actually, it wound up. I wound up getting a job out of it, because I was one of the other parents was a fairly high level executive at a company that had a job opening that fit my background, and I asked him about it, and he said, "Well, I'll introduce you to the guy." He said, "I know." He said, "If you can handle those two guys, you can handle anybody in our organization." I'm like, "Okay, well,
Awesome.
that's high praise." So at the end of the day, you never know where it's going to take you. So um, those being good with your parents, and having a I like your idea of relationship if you can develop it, but I'm an amateur at that at this point. I'm working on it, but
Yeah, that's my best advice about parents. But and I think as one, I stood away. I don't think I ever have spoken to my daughter's soccer coach from high school. I don't think we've ever said one word. And
yeah.
volleyball coach, I said the same thing. And like we said hello. We knew each other a little bit. And I said, "Hey, that's it's nice to talk to you. This is the last time we're going to talk unless you come and seek me out
Yeah. Yeah.
because you don't want me in your face and I don't want to get in the way either. And that, I mean, I would love to have spoken to both of them, but they have to do their own thing. It's the way it goes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to move on to the next one here? We had
Yeah.
this is sort of an age old one. My wife's a teacher, so she's coached me through this a little bit from time to time, and that's players not paying attention in practice or talkative players. In this particular case, the comment was the coach was having a hard time getting the players to just listen in any way. And I thought there were some great comments in there about, and again, two sides of the, two sides of the coin. One was the brute force method of just get louder, or, somebody suggested running or push-ups or whatever it was, the punishment thing, which we won't get into today, but, and then the other one was just get quieter. Um,
Yeah.
keep giving. If they're going to talk while you're talking, you get a little quieter. You describe whatever it is that you want them to do and send them out there to do it. And I think it probably only takes once or twice where they have no clue what they're doing
Yeah.
before they start to listen. And those were the two kind of areas that we heard. And then I think there's a third, kind of a third piece of that, which is not everybody always has this opportunity, but say something compelling. If you're going to speak, there are some great storytellers like David Cordes is another one of the Edmonds. He's a great
Yeah.
storyteller, and maybe a better way of saying it is he tells stories in a great way. As they aren't, it's not always just an awesome story, but he can tell a story.
Hmm.
So he can tell a long story and keep your attention. And then there's guys like a Lou Holtz, for instance, who puts together 4 or 5 words that really hit you hard.
Yeah.
Like I looked up a couple of quotes before we came on. He said, "No one's ever drowned in sweat." I'm like, well, that's going to make you think a little bit, but somebody's going to hear that when you say it. Uh,
Yes.
I mean, I
Well,
prefer.
and it's
Yeah, go
it's
ahead.
interesting. It's interesting as coaches. We you can see the effects of other coaches. I have had no shortage of players wanting to punish people for their actions in practice. I've had players going, oh, we're going to be running suicides all day, and I'm like, guys, I'm not about punishment. Now I may restrict your playing time. I may take you out of a drill, but I'm not going to run. You guys aren't running suicides. And I'll say that, and I will tell you for a fact, I had a middle school team, 14s team, where I had one kid who just could not shut up. I mean, period. He was a nice kid, but he just could not stop talking over everything. And my solution, and I'll admit it, but I don't do it anymore, is I suicided them till they couldn't talk, because then they would listen, because they couldn't breathe. That I would not recommend that, but it's what I did. It was my tactic at the time. Um, and my experiences middle school and maybe freshman year can be some of the toughest ones. Probably middle school more, because once you become an eighth grader, you're the top dog at your school, at your among the sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, and you're at the knuckleheaded age. I remember my kid's vice principal in middle school said, "You don't try to make any sense out of anything your kids are doing right now, because it's going to be it's just they're at that stage. Just relax and enjoy it." So I think there are better ways to do it. And right now I'm running into that kind of problem, and I call them on it. I'm like, "Oh, guys, I deserve a little respect here. Where I'm doing a lot of work to try to get you guys going here, and you're not listening. You're having conversations while I'm talking." And but Yes, I think the idea of you explain a drill and they can't do it, and then they get embarrassed by it can work. I'm not so sure to work with my veteran players who are the ones that are my problem right now, not my new players. They're very respectful.
Maybe. Yeah,
That's,
maybe.
that stuff
Yeah.
you got to deal
I
with.
think it boils down more to say something that's important.
Yeah.
Say something that's either interesting or important,
Yeah.
and rest of it needs to not be said. It can be that simple. That might take some advanced planning. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you may have to plan out some of the things you're going to say. And I know you're coaching boys; it's even worse. Like if they have to stand there for more than 30 seconds, it's a punishment to them.
Well,
Uh,
that's a big piece of advice there. And here's a comment for us. Let's take a look here from Lauren. So kids want to be heard. Yeah, I think that's true.
yeah, yeah, she is exactly right. Kids, they want to be heard. They have to sit through school all day. If there's nobody there to hear them, so that they get with their teammates. That's a great point on her part. What we have done for a long time, we've just told the players, "Hey, look, we're going to warm up for the first 15 minutes of practice. If you want to get here 15 minutes early, you can talk about all the stuff from until 15 minutes into practice. Get out all the gossip, or whose boyfriend broke up with them, or whose you know
Yeah.
mom did something stupid or whatever. Get all that out in the first 15 minutes. Go and tell everybody, because after the first 15, then you're warming up anyway.
Right. Well,
It's
funny you say that because we did a version of that. Our club was your practice starts 15 minutes before court time. You need to be here 15 minutes ahead of time. And it was interesting. It was more on the girls' side. On the boys' side, when you did that, they'd have their 5 minute catch up, and then they'd be out on the court during the next 10 minutes of their 15-minute time. Just if they could get on the court, they would go and play. But again, it gives them. I agree with you. You need that decompression to do that, and we don't start practice till 30 minutes after school lets out, kind of for that reason. But when it goes on during, and there's critiquing, and I got a couple players who are out there trying to coach, so we work with that. And I'm like, okay, guys, you can talk about that kind of thing after we're done here, but we all need to kind of listen for a minute, and I'll just stop. I'll say, look, we're just going to sit here and be quiet for a second because I really need you to focus on this. But I think there's all kinds of different ways you can deal with that. Punitive ways aren't great, and recognizing what they need, to Lauren's point, is a really important part of that as well. To give them that opportunity to do that, and my players have actually said we want more bonding opportunities. I'm like, cool, let's do that. What do you want to do? I don't know. Well, okay, well, take a little responsibility for it. So finishing
homework.
up.
Make it homework. Yeah, last one. This is a funny topic, and I'm sure both of us have stories about it.
Yeah.
One of the coaches came on and said that, and this is one of the better excuses for missing
Really
practice.
quickly here, BJ, this week is a
Yeah.
week when everybody's talking about goats for different reasons, but this is a different goat.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's goat week. Yeah, this coach came on and said that his player has a show goat and needed to miss practice. Like that's just perfect.
You got
You
to love
know,
the FFA.
it brought it. Yeah, exactly. I went to a small high school that had FFA, and there were those things. I coached at a small high school where we had those types of things. Um, Kids are going to have stuff outside of volleyball, and they should. We should encourage it. Uh, we had. I think I told a story in there. We had a kid that missed a couple of days of practice because she was kicked by a cow. And then later, that same kid rolled her four wheeler over on top of herself, and she couldn't get it off of her. She needed her brothers to come and push it off of her, and still made practice that day.
Yeah.
Like, what's the matter with you today? And she's like,
Yeah.
well, I rolled the four wheeler over.
Yeah, and we all have those kinds of things. I think that it's much more so. When I first started, I was doing club ball North Shore Chicago with folks who were in the not old school, but in the mindset of this is a primary thing. And if
Yeah,
it's not a primary thing for you, you should do something else. And that still pervades highly competitive programs places because you can cut kids and that kind of thing. Um,
yeah,
a lot of us coaches are not in that environment. I'm not in that environment. I have a kid right now who has been apologetic because he hasn't been able to get to tryouts. A lot of it's getting all the clearance things done because they don't know about birth certificates and physicals and impact testing, which is brain testing and all this stuff.
right,
They have about 15 things they have to do, which take probably 5 or 6 hours to do total that they and their parents have to do just to be able to come into my gym and try out, and they just don't know it. I had a kid come in on Thursday of tryout week and say, "I'd like to try out." I said, "What have you got done?" Nothing. I'm like, okay, here's where you go, here's how you get started, bang through. And he's a freshman, and I want him in the program because I don't know if he might be 6'10" by the time he's a senior, and he's about 5'3" right now, and I'm like, I don't care, come on out. um, so you get all of that, and it's
yeah,
important to be somewhat tolerant. I mean, I've got a guy who couldn't make practice yesterday because he was working. I've got a guy who has to go home at a certain hour to babysit so his parents can work.
right.
What are you going to say to somebody like that? Oh, you can't be in the program? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. It's you have to. It's a different time. Um, I think maybe school volleyball can maybe take that stance of it's school family, or family school volleyball. Uh, but I think it's dangerous to draw a hard line there. I think just some flexibility. You're going to lose some players if you do that.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I'm in an art school. I have guys who are in the play, in the pit band, in the orchestra, in the mariachis. So I'm
yeah,
like, so you make lemonade. I went out to the mariachi director and said, "Hey, could you come in and play at our games?"
yeah,
And I
there you
haven't gotten him to do that yet, but I think he will this year. And it's like, hey, I got a mariachi band doing the national anthem. I think it's
go. What
great.
fun would that be? That'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, it's one of those things where you gotta, and honestly, I'm getting more athletes out of the art side of the school than I am from the athletic side of the school
Yeah.
because I used to get soccer players. The soccer coach has started a club and they play during my season, and I can't get them now. So I finally, so I've spent the first 5 years trying to get cross sport athletes, and I finally this year the light bulb went off about a week ago. I'm like, why am I doing this? This is not where I'm going to get volleyball players. I'm going to get
Right.
volleyball players from kids who don't have another sport and would like to do a sport just to have done one. And maybe some of them will get really, really good at it. And it's like, okay, huh, how about that? There's an idea.
Well, we're 10 minutes past our hour, so we should probably wrap it up.
That's just
It's
like
been a
us.
great discussion. I hope people, particularly the VCT folks, enjoyed hearing some of the topics if they haven't read about them or whatever. But we'll see how well this format goes. And I don't think we'll do it every week, but I don't know, every once in a
We
while,
do it
maybe
those
we can.
weeks when guests are reluctant. And by the way, this is a very comfortable place. So if we reach out to you and ask if you'd like to join us. We don't bite. We haven't had anybody go off screaming after the time with us, and it's a great opportunity to learn and share. More important, to share with the other coaching community because these are most of the things we cover are the things that if you're running a top 10 college program, you're probably not going to, really get much out of what we're doing here that you don't already know. But if you're a newer coach or if you're a coach in a small program or have, limitations, it's good for us to share those with each other and learn from them. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, for sure. All
Great.
right. I got to
Well,
run, Steve.
yep, I'll see you next
We'll
week.
next week. Yeah, next week
All
for
right.
sure.